Hello and welcome to my channel. Normally I review movies, but since it's February and movie releases are kind of slow, I decided to check out a few television series, which brings me to Avatar: The Last Airbender. Netflix recently released this live adaptation of the beloved children's cartoon, and being a longtime fan of it, I decided to check it out. For those of you unfamiliar with the series, it takes place in a fantasy world in which there is magic. Magic is called bending and only accessible by beings called benders. Each bender can only use one element of bending depending on which tribe they were born to. The original cartoon series had 3 seasons and ended with a movie and followed Aang the Last Airbender. Aang is a being called the Avatar, which is a person capable of using all 4 types of bending. The Avatar is a special and unique entity in the universe, and each time the Avatar dies, a new one is born somewhere else. Aang is a little boy from the Air Nation who miraculously survives the death of his people when he was accidentally frozen in ice. 100 years later, the series begins with him being awoken from the ice by 2 water tribe children named Sokka and Katara. The show follows Aang and his new friends as they traverse the globe trying to put an end to a war that has been raging for 100 years. In each season of the show, Aang took to mastering one element of bending, and the show ended with him confronting Fire Lord Ozai, the leader of the antagonist nation. Okay, that was a lot of information, but that's the gist of the show. It's a hero's journey, with each season being about the hero learning a new skill and growing as a person. They give character arcs to each of his companions and some of his enemies, and over time it culminates in an epic saga about a chosen warrior taking on the evil emperor. It's not the most original storyline, but the creators of Atla did manage to create a lot of meaningful moments in the original cartoon, and that's why it's still culturally relevant a decade later. Now that you have a bit of context, let's talk about the Netflix show. It follows the same storyline as the cartoon, with the first season having the same trajectory, just with a massively sped up timeline. They cut out a lot of the filler moments and the humor and tried to condense down the major moments of the show into single episode arcs. They still hit a lot of the big moments like Jet and his band of outlaws, Bumi and Aang being friends, Iroh and Zuko bonding, Kyoshi Island, and the events in the north. But they cut out a lot of the little moments from all of those storylines and made a few minor changes to it here and there. The Netflix version of the story has less humor in it and spends a lot more time focused on progressing the plot rather than building up the world around them. There are a few good changes, like what they did with the crew of Zuko's ship, but generally, the changes are meant to streamline the story and don't feel great. They make the story feel rushed and overly dramatic, like we're watching a soap opera instead of a hero's journey. All that said, the writing of the show is not that different from the writing of the cartoon. Fans of the original will likely be able to appreciate it still, and it takes enough of the good parts of the cartoon that a general audience will enjoy it too, if they can get past the other problems the show has. Which brings me to the production quality, the visuals and the soundtrack. I'll start with a bit of praise. The soundtrack for the show is exceptional, and reminds me a lot of Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and Star Wars. It's great at accompanying the emotional journey of each character, builds a unique atmosphere in each new location they visit, and adds a ton of character to the show. It's a little bit overdramatic at times, but it works well for accompanying the story. A lot of it is orchestral instrumentals with a variety of influences. It sounds great, really captures the fantasy vibe, and brings a ton of heart. The visuals are not nearly as good. There is an absolute metric ton of CGI in the show, and it ranges from god-awful to sort of okay. They use it for everything from the backgrounds to the fights, and even use it to fully replace the actors at times. It is often textured badly and gives a real uncanny valley feeling. I often found myself completely pulled out of the immersion by what I was looking at. There are some great moments, and there is a lot of future potential when it comes to the bending, but the rest of the CGI just feels like an overload. The actors are constantly on a soundstage, and it's fairly obvious when you see nothing but volume shots the entire time. They did try to recreate some of the locations and build a few physical sets, and these were generally well done. Finally, we come to the acting. The original cartoon was voiced by professional voice actors, most of whom were adults well into their careers. They did an incredible job of the humor and the emotional journeys, and there were very few deadpan line deliveries over the years. The Netflix live adaptation cast had a real challenge in trying to represent these characters on screen. For starters, half of the cast are young adults without much experience. They look the part, but sometimes struggle to maintain a good screen presence and can on occasion deliver their lines a little awkwardly. They're also trying to adapt a hyper-cartoonish style into real life, and it doesn't translate well. Cartoons can get away with exaggerated features and motion, but real humans can't make their eyes pop out of their heads. It's a problem of trying to adapt too closely and not realizing which parts should stay in the anime. They end up creating characters that look like the ones from the cartoon, but don't quite feel like them. The exceptions to this are Fire Lord Ozai, played by Daniel Kim, and Prince Zuko, played by Dallas Liu. Some of the cast end up creating new versions of their characters, like Uncle Iroh being a lot more serious or Pakku being a lot less bigoted. These instances are interesting takes on the originals, but most of the characters don't feel fleshed out or new. The actors may grow into these roles over time, but I imagine a lot of the problem is actually with the direction. They're trying too hard to adapt the source material without changing it at all, and it just doesn't work. For standout performances so far, I'd point to Daniel Kim, Dallas Liu, and Paul Sun-Hyung Lee. The three of them have managed to create interesting characters. One villain and two anti-heroes that we want to see more of. Paul Sun-Hyung Lee and Dallas Liu got to do some especially moving emotional moments in the first season, and I think both of them deserve a little recognition for their work. I was always moved by Zuko's storyline, but these two really brought that familial bond to life. Overall, I enjoyed the first season of Avatar: The Last Airbender, but I definitely see the problems with its production. The visuals are not good, and the writing leaves a lot to be desired. The acting could also use some work, but there is something there at the heart of this show that wants to break out and be entertaining. If you like the originals or you just like fantasy stories, give this one a try. As for a rating, I'd give the first season a 6 out of 10. Remember, these are just my thoughts on the show. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Bye bye.